Welcome, drowsy dreamer, to a world of marble columns, echoing forums, and, surprisingly stinky streets. A world where the mighty Roman Empire ruled from Britain to Egypt, yet couldn't figure out reliable indoor plumbing for everyone. A world of grand senators in togas, fierce gladiators in the arena, and daily life that was far less glamorous than Hollywood would have you believe. Tonight, we drift slowly, almost imperceptibly, into the very heart of Rome. Not the postcard version with pristine temples and gleaming statues, but the actual daily grind that made even the strongest legionary groan. The Rome of overcrowded apartments, dodgy sausages, and bathhouses that might leave you with more parasites than you arrived with. So lie back, tuck yourself into your soft, clean bed, free of fleas, we can hope, and prepare to explore the reality behind the empire's marble mask. We won't be marching with legions or conquering Gaul. We'll be hauling chamber pots, scratching insect bites, and dodging suspicious street food. Because this is where the true spirit of Roman life breathed, in the smoky kitchens, the crowded insulae apartments, the sticky communal toilets. If you enjoy drifting through the dustiest, slowest corridors of history, feel free to gently press the subscribe button. It helps this sleepy little channel continue uncovering the secret moldy corners of the past. And you can do it whenever you wake up. There's no rush. We'll still be here, whispering softly about undercooked lentil stews and saw rats as big as small dogs. Now, let us imagine waking up in a typical Roman insula, a crowded apartment block rising several stories above narrow, noisy streets. Your room is small, barely large enough to stretch your arms, and your neighbor's snoring seeps through the thin walls like a sorrowful ghost. The air is heavy with last night's fish sauce, sweat, and the sour tang of communal latrines down the hallway. No fresh morning dew here, only the scent of stale olive oil and damp wool blankets. You rub your eyes, grit from the unwashed bedding clinging to your lashes. The mattress beneath you is stuffed with straw or reeds, flattened and crawling with tiny uninvited guests. The first sound of the day isn't birdsong, but the clatter of carts and the shouts of merchants below. Someone hawks cheap wine. Someone else argues over fish prices, their voice echoing up like a grumpy rooster. You pull on your tunic, a simple rectangle of wool or linen, stiff with yesterday's sweat and maybe a few mysterious stains you've chosen to ignore. Shoes, if you have them, are rough leather sandals, worn thin by endless alleyways and uneven paving stones. Or perhaps you go barefoot, as many did, your soles toughened like old saddle leather. Breakfast? Nothing resembling warm toast or steaming coffee. A crust of coarse bread, maybe dipped in cheap wine or vinegar water to soften the edges. A handful of olives if you're lucky. No jam, no eggs, no buttery croissant to cradle your dreams. Just something to stop your stomach from growling too loudly during the day's errands. After choking down the dry mouthful, you step outside into the chaos of the Roman street. Vendors bellow, dogs fight over scraps, and a passing litter bearer shoves aside pedestrians to make way for a wealthy patron reclining on cushions. Above your head, chamber pots are emptied with a shout, "Cave Canem," warning you to dodge or get a surprise shower from above. The stone streets are slick with mud, spilled wine, and other less mentionable fluids. Sandals squelch, toes slip, and the smell is unforgettable. Public fountains gurgle in corners, a rare source of clean water, at least cleaner than the Tiber. People crowd around, filling clay jugs, gossiping about gladiatorial games or the latest imperial scandal. Someone boasts about their cousin's new toga, another curses the price of grain. A small child chases a chicken between legs, squealing with glee as the bird flaps frantically away. Around you, apartment buildings lean at odd angles, some as tall as 5 or 6 stories. Built quickly and cheaply, they creak ominously in the breeze, and entire upper floors sometimes collapse under the weight of too many dinner parties or heavy amphorae of oil. Fires are a constant threat. One careless oil lamp could ignite an inferno that devours a whole block before the night watch can stagger over with buckets. The streets are narrow, meant more for feet and handcarts than for grand processions. Each corner hides a new surprise. A bustling bakery where flatbread steams, a grimy tavern stinking of sour wine and goat stew, or a shrine to some minor household god, bedecked with wilted garlands. Meanwhile, Pickpockets slip deftly among the crowds, lifting coins, bread, or even small cheeses from distracted hands. A sudden commotion, a shouted curse, and a chase begins. Two skinny kids darting between legs while a furious matron waves her broom in hot pursuit. By mid-morning, the heat rises. Rome's sun blazes against the pale walls, shimmering off roof tiles and turning the alleys into slow-cooking ovens. Your tunic clings uncomfortably, sweat trickles down your spine, and the city's aroma intensifies into an almost tangible haze. But you carry on. Because in Rome, there are always chores, errands for the bakery, wood for the hearth, water from the fountain, endless cleaning and cooking. You might barter in the market for lentils or figs, carefully counting each coin. Perhaps you deliver laundry, your arms heavy with tunics that smell only slightly less offensive after washing. Through all this, the endless background music of Rome thrums on. Hammers striking in the smithy, street musicians piping out shrill tunes, preachers calling for donations, children squabbling over pebbles. Life hums at every corner, weaving a tapestry of sweat, shouts, and endless striving. And so, tonight as you drift off, imagine that same street below you, lit only by smoky oil lamps and moonlight. Imagine the faint whisper of a lyre, the creak of a wooden sign in the breeze, the distant bark of a mongrel dog. Imagine the clatter of sandals and the hush of voices, drifting up to your tiny room, where you lie half-covered in a thin, itchy blanket. Your stomach is full enough, your feet sore, your mind already floating somewhere beyond the city walls. Breathe slowly. The empire can wait until tomorrow. The market's cries will fade with the night. And for now, you're safe, curled like a cat on your straw bed, dreaming of cool fountains and breezy hills beyond the chaos. Sleep now. The alley is quiet. The amphorae are stacked. And Rome, with all its grime and grandeur, sighs itself into a restless slumber beside you. The Roman morning did not begin with the gentle chirp of an alarm or the smell of fresh coffee wafting in from the kitchen. It began with a clamor. A rising tide of shouts, wooden cart wheels screeching over cobblestones, donkeys braying in protest, and the echo of a neighbor's angry dispute drifting up from below. Before your eyes even flickered open, you were already immersed in a chorus of daily chaos. The first breath of the day carried the scents of the city. Sour wine spilled in the street, ashes from last night's cooking fires, and the rank perfume of humanity living elbow to elbow. You might stretch on your straw mattress, feeling the familiar sting of flea bites on your ankles and the ache of a poorly supported spine. Beside you, a sibling or a cousin might still snore softly, their breath heavy with yesterday's cheap wine or fish stew. There was no privacy. Everyone slept together in the same cramped room, tangled in a mass of rough blankets and worn-out cloaks. Once awake, you rose cautiously. The floor was cold and sometimes damp, depending on last night's rain or an unfortunate leak from an upstairs neighbor's chamber pot. You slipped into your tunic, the same one you wore yesterday, and the day before, and perhaps all week, stiff with sweat and smoke. Your feet met the ground reluctantly, toes curling at the first step onto the cool dirt floor. Breakfast, if it could be called that, awaited. A small crust of bread, often so hard it needed to be soaked in wine or vinegar water to avoid cracking a tooth. Perhaps a smear of pungent fish paste called garum, if you were lucky enough to have a dab left from the market. The meal was eaten quickly, standing or sitting on a wobbly stool, eyes half closed and mind already drifting toward the day's chores. Outside, the noise crescendoed. Vendors began shouting the prices of their goods: olives, onions, stale loaves, and cheap tunics. An old woman screeched about the virtues of her goat cheese, her voice echoing down narrow lanes. Fishermen dumped crates of writhing eels into barrels of brine, their sharp scent slicing through the morning air. A young boy darted between feet, hawking watered-down wine and cheap figs to passers-by. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crowed lazily, thoroughly outdone by the human racket. For many Romans, the first task after eating was a visit to the public latrines. These communal toilets were social hubs as much as practical necessities. Long stone benches with holes, all lined up in a row, no dividers, no privacy, just a long morning chat with your neighbors as everyone did their business. A trough of running water beneath helped carry waste away, but cleanliness was, an optimistic idea at best. Sponges on sticks, shared and rinsed in salty water, replaced toilet paper, a detail best left unimagined as you drift off to sleep later. After this invigorating morning ritual, it was time to wash up. The wealthiest Romans might have private baths, but for most people, cleanliness meant a trip to the public bathhouse. These were grand social centers, vast halls echoing with chatter, laughter, and the occasional argument. You paid a small fee, disrobed in a crowded changing area, and stepped into a sequence of rooms. Tepidarium, the warm room to start sweating. A caldarium, the hot, steamy room where you'd scrub and soak. A frigidarium, the cold plunge to tighten pores and jolt your senses back to life. Soap as we know it did not exist. Instead, you rubbed your skin with oil, then scraped it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil, removing dirt and dead skin in satisfying grey rolls. Public baths were places of gossip, business deals, and political intrigue, and also prime breeding grounds for lice and various skin ailments. After bathing, you might apply scented oils to cover the remaining odors. Lavender, myrrh, or rose if you were lucky. If not, perhaps rancid olive oil sufficed. Clean or not, you were now ready for the day's real labor. Market stalls needed to be manned, amphorae of wine carried up steep staircases, bread ovens stoked and watched with a vigilant eye. Fishermen mended nets and prepared hooks. Artisans in cramped workshops bent over jewelry, sandals, or figurines of gods. Children fetched water from fountains, the heavy clay jars knocking against thin knees as they weaved through the crowd. Meanwhile, wealthier Romans began their mornings differently. Patricians rose at leisure, sometimes to the soft strumming of a lyre or the gentle murmur of slaves preparing breakfast trays. They might lounge on couches, nibbling dates and figs, sipping watered-down wine as letters were read aloud. They would receive clients in the atrium, a daily ritual known as salutatio, where clients greeted their patron, sought favors, and gossiped about the latest Senate squabbles. Afterward, perhaps a stroll to the forum to exchange greetings with other dignified citizens, or a trip to a quiet garden courtyard to contemplate philosophy or dictate correspondence. Their days were planned, choreographed, and far removed from the grime of the lower alleys. But even for the elite, life was not without hazards. Parasites didn't discriminate, and unexpected illnesses lurked everywhere. Malaria from marshes, fevers that turned bones to jelly, or mysterious stomach ailments from questionable oysters. In the background, Rome always hummed, an unending tide of footsteps, laughter, shouts, and the occasional screech of a donkey cart gone rogue. The smell of baking bread drifted from communal ovens, mingling with whiffs of burning incense from street shrines. Vendors roasted chickpeas over hot coals, selling them in little paper twists to hungry passers-by. A philosopher might stand at a corner, expounding on virtue and duty to an audience of 3 bored teenagers and 1 stray dog. A beggar shuffled past, shaking a tin cup and murmuring blessings on all who spared a coin. By midday, the heat thickened. Cicadas buzzed like tiny, relentless fiddlers, and the marble columns of public buildings shimmered in the sunlight. People crowded into shaded porticos, fanning themselves with palm fronds or bits of linen, muttering curses at the punishing sun. Children played marbles or dice in dusty alleys, giggling and shouting until an adult barked them back to chores. In the wealthier districts, shady gardens with bubbling fountains offered respite. Women reclined on cushioned couches, fanning themselves delicately, their hair coiled into elaborate sculptures held together with pins and ribbons. A servant might peel a fig, while another brushed away flies with a horsehair whisk. Beyond the high garden walls, the city roared on, 1,000 small dramas unfolding in the sun-baked streets. The morning hours blurred into each other, each task feeding into the next, a slow, grinding rhythm that defined Roman life for the majority. For every senator giving speeches, there were hundreds of laborious hauling bricks, scribes copying endless scrolls, and bakers wiping sweat from their foreheads as they pulled yet another loaf from the oven. And so, tonight as you lie in your quiet, private room, imagine the Roman morning unfolding. The hum of market stalls, the sudden splash at a fountain, the chorus of curses and laughter echoing between cracked walls. Imagine the warmth of a clay cup in your hands, the rough tunic against your skin, the sour bite of cheap wine at breakfast. Feel the grit under your feet, the noise in your ears, the smoky taste in the back of your throat. Breathe slowly. The morning rush has passed. The forum can wait. The bathhouse chatter fades into the distance. Sleep now. The olive oil lamps flicker low. The city walls hold back the night, and the Tiber glides on in silence beneath the moon. Imagine stepping into a Roman insula, a multi-story apartment building that was home to the vast majority of Rome's urban population. Forget gleaming villas with open courtyards and marble fountains. These towering, creaking blocks were the heartbeat of the city, built hastily and often poorly, stacked like loaves of bread in a crowded oven. From the outside, the insula looked impressive. 4, sometimes 5 or 6 stories high, towering above narrow streets where donkeys shuffled and vendors squatted with baskets of figs. Wooden balconies leaned dangerously, laundry flapping in the hot breeze, clay pots balanced precariously on ledges. But step inside, and you entered a world of shadows, musty air, and a maze of tight corridors. The staircases twisted upward in steep, uneven spirals. They creaked ominously beneath each step, reminding you that entire floors had been known to collapse without warning. Light was a rare luxury. Oil lamps sputtered weakly, sending shadows crawling like insects along the cracked plaster walls. Openings for windows, if they existed at all, were tiny slits, more for the pigeons than for the people. At each level, you passed narrow doorways covered by ragged cloth or thin wooden shutters. Inside, each room was a single multipurpose cell. It was a bedroom, kitchen, dining area, and storage closet all in one. A cramped cocoon that held entire families. The walls, once painted with cheerful reds and yellows, now flaked and wept from rain leaks. Ceilings sagged where the plaster had soaked up water from the neighbors cooking above. You might see bundles of reeds propped in corners, waiting to be woven into baskets or mats, and jugs lined up like silent sentries against the back wall. At the center, a small hearth or portable brazier stood blackened from years of smoky fires. It was too small to provide much warmth in winter and too smothering in summer, when heat from the upper levels rolled down like a thick, invisible wave. The smoke, with nowhere to escape, clung stubbornly to hair, clothes, and lungs, leaving a bitter taste with every breath. Meals were prepared over this tiny fire. A pot of watery porridge might bubble gently, its thin scent barely masking the aroma of mildew and stale air. Perhaps a few turnips or lentils floated in the mix, or if fortune was kind, a scrap of dried fish or salted pork rind. A wooden ladle leaned against the rim, sticky and worn smooth from years of scraping. Sleeping arrangements were communal and cramped. Straw mats or thin mattresses were laid directly on the floor. Children wriggled like restless puppies, pressing into their parents' sides for warmth during chilly nights. In summer, everyone sweated in a sticky tangle of limbs, tossing and turning as insects buzzed relentlessly. There were no private baths here. Residents washed at public fountains or the nearest bathhouse, if they could afford the fee. Otherwise, a quick splash from a shared basin would have to do, the water muddy from too many hands and faces. A ragged cloth might be used to scrub the skin, but soap was rare and harsh, scraping more than cleansing. The toilet situation was equally grim. Some insulae had shared latrines on the ground floor or behind the building, open pits with rough stone seats, buzzing with flies and the stench of neglect. Those living on upper floors used chamber pots, emptied by dumping contents directly into the alley below. Cries of cave, Latin for watch out, warned unfortunate passers-by below, though many discovered too late and learned the importance of hugging the walls. Noise was constant, echoing up and down the hollow shaft of the building. A baby's wail mixed with the bark of a dog. A pot crashing to the floor collided with drunken laughter from the neighbors. Arguments flared, someone's mother shouted curses through thin walls, and a couple argued over a lost coin or a missing sandal. There was no quiet hour, no sweet hush of solitude, only the endless murmur of shared life, punctuated by sudden yells or sharp bursts of song. Children darted between doorways, chasing each other with reed toys or scraps of old cloth twisted into balls. Elderly residents perched near windows, squinting down at the street and grumbling about the price of olives or the arrogance of passing patricians. Laundry hung overhead like ghostly banners, dripping soap suds onto the heads of those below. Despite the hardship, small rituals wove the community together. A mother shared a scoop of beans with her neighbor. A father mended another man's sandal in exchange for a slice of cheese. Old women taught younger ones how to twist their hair into protective knots against lice, and boys learned to patch their tunics with mismatched scraps. In this tight web of barter and shared suffering, kindness flickered like a candle in the drafty halls. At night, oil lamps glowed faintly in each room. The air turned thick and heavy, the day's heat trapped among the bricks and beams. The building creaked and sighed, as if sharing in the residents' exhaustion. Murmurs softened into snores, and the occasional bark or drunken song from the street below drifted upward like a distant lullaby. Yet even sleep was not guaranteed peace. Dreams tangled with fears of sudden fires, a constant terror in these dry, crowded structures. Flames could race up wooden stairs in moments, leaving families to scramble blindly into the smoky dark, clutching children and precious bundles of grain. Others feared structural collapse, the entire insula giving way under its own weight in the dead of night. Disease also haunted the darkness. Fever spread quickly through shared rooms, and infection respected no social ties. Coughs echoed like warnings, and desperate prayers were whispered into the smoky rafters. Charms and amulets hung over doorways in a fragile hope that spirits might be appeased. In wealthier parts of Rome, families reclined in airy courtyards with fragrant gardens and mosaic floors. But here, in the insula, life was an unending negotiation with discomfort, noise, and uncertainty. Even so, laughter still rose above the grime. A mother tickling a child to stifle a cry, a neighbor telling a bawdy joke after a long day's labor, a teenager humming as they mended a tunic under a flickering lamp. As you rest now, safe in your quiet room with soft sheets and silent walls, imagine lying on a coarse mat among snoring family members. Feel the heat pressing in from every side, hear the muffled shuffle of feet on creaky stairs above, smell the sharp tang of stale smoke and sour wine drifting through cracks. Breathe deeply. The rush of the street is fading. The flickering lamplight dances on the wall, painting small shadows that sway like tired dancers. Tomorrow will bring more stairs to climb, more pots to scrub, more bread to chew carefully around missing teeth. But for now, let your eyes close. The building still stands, the fire has not come, and the stars twinkle above Rome's endless maze of rooftops. Sleep now. The city's heartbeat slows, and the moon drifts gently over the tiled roofs and crooked balconies. Tonight, you are safe inside your walls of mud, brick, and whispered dreams. Close your eyes and imagine a Roman kitchen, if you can even call it that. Forget shiny countertops, spice racks, or humming refrigerators. In most Roman homes, especially in the cramped insulae, a kitchen was a corner of a smoky room, dominated by a small hearth or portable brazier. The hearth was the heart of Roman cooking. A simple pit of hot coals, a few blackened pots, and maybe a single iron pan balanced precariously on stones. No exhaust fan to whisk away the smoke, no reliable oven for baking golden loaves. Instead, thick, acrid fumes drifted lazily upward, staining walls and throats alike. The most common dish for the average Roman was pulse, a thick porridge made of emmer wheat or barley, boiled until it became a glutinous, pale mass. This humble gruel formed the backbone of Roman sustenance, endlessly versatile, endlessly bland. If fortune allowed, you might add a drizzle of olive oil, a sprinkle of salt, or a handful of lentils for texture. On rare, glorious days, maybe a scrap of cheese or a few wilted greens joined the pot. Alongside pools, bread was another daily companion. But don't imagine fluffy baguettes or golden rolls. Roman bread was heavy, dense, and often gritty with bits of stone from poorly ground flour. Loaves were flat or domed, scored with deep cuts to help them bake evenly over unreliable heat. Each bite threatened to chip a tooth already weakened by years of chewing harsh grains and stale crusts. Wine was the standard beverage, but again, not the shimmering ruby nectar you might romanticize. Most Roman wine was cheap, sour, and heavily diluted with water. Drinking it straight was considered barbaric. The poor might stretch a single jug for days, mixing in seawater or herbs to disguise the sharpness. Aged, sweet, fragrant wine was the domain of the wealthy, sipped in elegant dining rooms while reclined on plush couches. In these cramped kitchens, meat was a rare guest. Meat was expensive and difficult to preserve. When it did appear, it was often salted or smoked beyond recognition. A bit of pork fat thrown into a stew, or a stringy strip of goat meat boiled until it surrendered every last bit of flavor. The wealthiest families, of course, feasted on roast peacocks, flamingo tongues, and honey-glazed dormice. Culinary performances meant to impress dinner guests more than satisfy hunger. Fish offered another option, though it too was reserved for those living close to rivers or coastal ports. Fresh fish was salted immediately or pickled to survive the journey inland. The pungent smell of fish sauce, garum, permeated nearly every Roman kitchen. Garum was made by fermenting fish guts and salt under the sun for weeks, resulting in a salty, sharp liquid beloved by Romans and loathed by many outsiders. It was splashed onto almost everything, from stews to bread, adding a burst of umami to otherwise meager meals. Vegetables played a central role for most citizens. Cabbage, onions, leeks, garlic, lentils, and chickpeas appeared in endless combinations, boiled or stewed until they lost all shape. These humble ingredients anchored the daily diet, especially during lean months when grain stores dwindled. Fruits such as figs, dates, apples, and grapes were seasonal treats, sometimes preserved in honey or vinegar for later indulgence. Eggs were precious, guarded jealously when hens deigned to lay. A boiled egg might be divided among multiple children, each savoring a single bite. Honey, another rare treasure, sweetened dishes for the lucky few who could afford it. The rest relied on herbs, thyme, dill, coriander, grown in small rooftop pots or window ledges to brighten the endless monotony of grain mush. Eating wasn't merely functional, it carried deep social meaning. The poor dined quickly, perched on stools or standing near the hearth, meals devoured between chores. In contrast, the wealthy sprawled luxuriously at lavish banquets called convivium. Reclining on couches, they were attended by slaves who shuffled platters of oysters, pheasant, and honey cakes from room to room. Musicians played softly. Poets recited lines to distract guests from their own gluttony. Such feasts could last for hours, punctuated by excessive drinking and whispered intrigues. In the cramped apartments of the insulae, meals were shared in hushed circles. A single clay bowl passed from hand to hand, a communal spoon clinking against its sides. Children scraped crusts clean, while adults chewed carefully to avoid breaking teeth on hidden grit. There was no room for manners. Survival trumped etiquette every time. Laughter still found its way between bites, small jokes about the neighbor's burnt stew or the landlord's latest rent demands. Preservation techniques were crucial to survival. Salted meat hung from beams, bundles of herbs dangled from rafters, and clay jars of olive oil stood guarded in dusty corners. Pickling, salting, drying, every method was employed to stretch supplies through unpredictable seasons. Even so, mold, pests, and spoilage remained constant threats. Each lost jar or shriveled sausage a small tragedy in a life already balanced on the edge. Markets were vital lifelines. Bustling, chaotic, and aromatic, they spilled across city streets in a colorful sprawl. Vendors hawked lentils, olives, garum jars, fish, figs, and crusty loaves. Shouts rose above the clatter of carts and the squawks of caged hens. Coins clinked, hands gestured wildly, and disputes flared over the freshness of produce or the honesty of weights. Shopping was both a daily necessity and a social event, a chance to hear the latest gossip and to judge neighbors' bargaining skills. Food fraud was rampant. Vendors diluted wine with water or seawater, padded sacks of flour with chaff, and presented rancid fish as fresh from Ostia. Shrewd buyers sniffed, pinched, and demanded samples, while the less fortunate resigned themselves to surprise illnesses and grumbling bellies. In wealthier homes, slaves cooked in separate kitchens, sometimes even in outbuildings to keep smoke and smells away from delicate nostrils. Chefs experimented with exotic spices brought from India or Egypt, concocting sauces so strong they could mask the taste of questionable meat. Guests marveled at these flavors, praising the host's sophistication even as their stomachs twisted in protest later that night. As you lie in your bed tonight, full from snacks and modern comforts, imagine standing barefoot on a gritty floor, stirring a pot of pools while sweat drips into the broth. Imagine dipping crusty bread into a communal bowl, savoring a bite of salted fish as if it were the greatest luxury. Imagine the acrid smell of garum wafting through your window, the chatter of vendors echoing in your mind, the constant worry that your bread might be moldy tomorrow. Hear the scrape of clay bowls, the soft murmur of a mother portioning out the last few olives to children with hungry eyes. Taste the sour wine, thin and sharp, leaving a vinegary sting on your tongue. Feel the rough wool tunic clinging to your skin, the eternal warmth of the brazier offering a comfort just shy of enough. In those cramped rooms, every meal was a testament to survival. Every bite was a gamble, every shared bowl an act of quiet solidarity. Through grit, smoke, and endless boiling pots, the Roman kitchen told the story of a people who endured, with jokes, curses, and the occasional stolen fig, the eternal challenge of simply staying fed. Sleep now. The pot is bubbling softly. The bread is stale but safe. And tonight, at least, you won't hear a vendor shout fresh fish before sunrise. Imagine, if you will, stepping into the steamy, echoing halls of a Roman bath. Your skin tingles from the sharp morning air outside, but here inside, mist swirls around marble columns, and voices bounce off tiled walls in a muffled, dreamy chorus. The baths, or thermae, were at the center of Roman public life. More than just places to wash, they were social arenas, business meeting spots, exercise centers, and gossip hubs all rolled into one. Rich or poor, citizen or foreigner, everyone came here eventually. Admission was usually cheap, sometimes even free thanks to a generous patron or emperor hoping for popularity points. Your journey through the baths began in the appetitorium, the changing room. Here, you stripped off your rough tunic and handed your clothes to an attendant called a capsarius. If you were unlucky, the attendant might slip away with your belt pouch or trade your tunic for a coin behind your back. The floor was often cold, slippery, and littered with stray sandals and tunic ties. Next came the palestra, an open courtyard for exercise. Men, and sometimes women in separate facilities, wrestled, boxed, threw discus, or played ball games that left them panting and scraped. Exercise wasn't just for health. It was preparation for the bath itself, opening pores and softening the skin. Sweat dripped freely in the hot sun, mixing with dust from the courtyard and the sweet tang of nearby flower beds. Once sufficiently sweaty and sore, you headed for the bathing rooms. First, the tepidarium, the warm room. Here, a gentle warmth seeped into your muscles, easing aches from poor Roman mattresses and endless forum debates. Mosaic floors depicted dolphins, tritons, and sea nymphs. Steam curled upward, carrying whispers of garlic breath and oil-smeared skin. From there, you moved into the caldarium, the hot room. This was the sauna of the ancient world. A large pool of nearly scalding water steamed ominously at one end, while heated benches lined the walls. Slaves shuffled around, refilling braziers and ladling water onto heated stones. Sweat poured off every back, every brow, mixing into rivulets along the mosaics. Some bathers lay stretched out like sleepy lizards, others chatted loudly, plotting business deals or scandalous affairs. After roasting sufficiently, you might brave a plunge into the frigidarium, the cold room. A sudden shock of icy water jolted you awake, leaving goosebumps and squeals echoing off the walls. This final dip supposedly tightened the skin, closed the pores, and left you feeling renewed, or just wishing for a blanket and a cup of wine. But bathing wasn't done yet. Instead of soap, Romans used olive oil to clean themselves. They slathered it all over their bodies, letting it soak into the skin. Then came the strigil, a curved metal tool used to scrape off the oil along with sweat and dirt. The scrapings, a greasy, grimy paste, often fell to the floor in dark globs, sometimes scooped up and examined with mild disgust or competitive curiosity. Once scraped clean, at least by Roman standards, you might receive a massage. Slaves worked aromatic oils into your tired muscles, twisting and kneading with surprising strength. This final touch was a luxury not everyone could afford, but for those who did, it turned an ordinary bath into a mini vacation from Roman noise and chaos. Bathhouses offered more than pools and massages. Vendors roamed the halls, selling snacks like dates, nuts, and honey cakes. Musicians played lyres or flutes in the corner, while fortune-tellers whispered predictions to hopeful ears. Even barbers set up shop, trimming hair and beards between steaming rooms. A visit to the baths might last hours, a leisurely escape from crowded streets and dusty markets. Despite the grandeur, hygiene wasn't quite what we might imagine today. Water was reused, pools weren't always drained, and a thick film of oil, sweat, and dust clung to the surface by afternoon. The smell could shift from pleasantly herbal to deeply funky in a single crowded hour. Toilets in Roman bathhouses were communal affairs. Long benches with keyhole-shaped holes lined the walls, no privacy dividers in sight. A trough of water flowed beneath, theoretically carrying waste away, though sometimes it only moved it along a bit. A shared sponge on a stick, called a tessorium, was dipped in vinegar or salt water and passed around for cleaning up afterward. Today's visitors might shudder, but to Romans, it was just another communal ritual, discussed as casually as the latest chariot race. Bathing was tied to Roman identity. A clean, well-oiled body signified civilization and superiority. Barbarians were ridiculed for smelling of smoke or for neglecting to bathe often enough. Even emperors promoted public baths as symbols of Roman sophistication and generosity. Free or subsidized entry helped keep the masses happy, or at least too busy steaming to riot in the forum. For wealthier Romans, private baths within their villas offered even more elaborate experiences. Small personal caldoria and frigidaria, decorative fountains, perfumed steam rooms. A private masseur might wait by the marble basin, oils infused with saffron or rose petals ready for the day's pampering. In these spaces, luxury transcended hygiene and became a performance, a daily expression of wealth and power. Outside the city, travelers sought out roadside bathhouses, humbler, often dirtier cousins of the grand thermae. These rustic facilities served merchants, soldiers, and wandering philosophers, each grateful for any chance to scrape off dust and road grime. Many bathhouses also doubled as inns or taverns, creating bustling microcosms of Roman society where gossip spread faster than warm olive oil on a strigil. After a long soak, a bite to eat, and a final splash of cold water, you stepped back into the blinding daylight. Your skin glistened, your hair was slick, and your muscles sang with warmth and relief. But outside waited the noisy clamor of vendors, the stink of crowded streets, and the eternal Roman scramble for survival. In a city of 1 million souls, the baths offered an oasis, fleeting, imperfect, but deeply human. Now, as you lie in your quiet, private space, imagine reclining beside a marble pool, warm oil seeping into your skin, the gentle scrape of a strigil echoing through the mist. Imagine the low hum of conversations blending with harp notes and splashing water. Picture the aroma of lavender oil, sweet cakes, and wet stone curling around you like a soft blanket. Imagine stepping into the cold plunge, gasping, shivering, feeling every nerve in your body wake up to the distant sound of city bells. Imagine leaving behind that warmth, stepping into the dusk with soft skin and a quiet heart, ready to face another dusty, crowded day. Breathe deeply. The steam fades. The strigil rests. And tonight, there is no need to share a sponge on a stick. Sleep now. Your muscles are warm, your skin is clean, and no centurion will bang on your door before dawn. Close your eyes and imagine a Roman table. Not the grand banquet of an emperor, but the everyday spread of an ordinary Roman citizen. A wooden table, perhaps slightly warped, with mismatched clay plates and battered bronze spoons. The air smells of vinegar, garlic, and a faint hint of something fishy drifting from the kitchen hearth. The Roman diet was a curious blend of practicality, abundance, and bold flavors, some of which might challenge even the most adventurous modern eater. For the poor, the daily meal was simple and repetitive. Pulse, a thick porridge made of spelt or barley, formed the backbone of their diet. This gruel was boiled with water, sometimes with a pinch of salt or a drizzle of oil if fortune allowed. Occasionally, vegetables or legumes like lentils and chickpeas were added, creating a humble yet sustaining meal. A common worker might eat pulse twice or even 3 times a day, each serving as dull as the last. Bread played a central role, but Roman bread was no fluffy baguette or warm ciabatta. Loaves were dense, flat, and often dark, made with whole grains that were coarsely ground in stone mills. These mills left behind tiny bits of grit and stone dust that wore away at teeth, adding an extra crunch no one asked for. By middle age, many Romans suffered from worn-down molars and chronic tooth pain. Dental care was rudimentary at best, leaving most to soldier on with a resigned chew and a pained smile. Vegetables were a staple for most. Cabbage, onions, garlic, leeks, turnips, and carrots filled the stew pots and plates of the average Roman. Fresh greens like lettuce or arugula were eaten in season, sometimes drizzled with oil or vinegar. In times of scarcity, pickled vegetables and dried legumes stood in for fresh fare, ensuring some measure of nourishment during lean months. Fruit was more prized, sweet relief from the constant grind of grains and pulses. Figs, dates, apples, and pears were enjoyed by those who could afford them. Grapes were eaten fresh or dried into raisins, and the wealthiest Romans even imported cherries from distant lands. Honey, the main sweetener, was a luxury used sparingly to drizzle on fruit or mix into wine. Speaking of wine, no Roman table was complete without it. Wine was consumed by nearly everyone, even children, though it was always diluted with water. Drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric, an offense to civilized Roman sensibilities. For the poor, wine might be sour and cheap, sometimes cut with herbs or even chalk to stretch supplies. The wealthy enjoyed finer vintages from renowned vineyards, stored in clay amphorae sealed with pitch and wax. Then came the infamous garum, the Roman fish sauce. Made by fermenting fish guts, blood, and salt in the sun for weeks or months, garum was a pungent, salty condiment poured liberally on nearly everything. To Roman palates, it was a savory delight, a culinary treasure. To modern noses, it might resemble an accident at a seaside fish market left to bake in July heat. Regardless, garum was so essential that entire industries revolved around its production and trade. For those with coin to spare, the Roman culinary world expanded into extravagance. Exotic game birds like peacocks and flamingos appeared on patrician tables. Oysters and other shellfish were transported over long distances in damp seaweed to remain fresh. Roast boar, honey-glazed dormice, yes, actual mice, and sausages stuffed with pine nuts, pepper, and raisins turned feasts into edible theater. Elaborate banquets were performances as much as meals. Hosts showcased their wealth and sophistication by presenting a cascade of courses, each more shocking or delicate than the last. Pliny the Elder wrote of blackbirds stuffed inside pigs, which were then cooked whole to produce a surprise at carving. Emperors and elite families competed to serve the rarest dishes, including jellyfish, giraffe tongues, and other creatures that few modern diners would dare approach. While the upper class indulged, the poor often faced grain shortages and ration lines. The annona, a state-controlled grain dole, provided free or subsidized grain to the urban masses, especially in Rome. Bread riots were not uncommon when supplies faltered. Hunger lurked as a constant shadow behind the empire's marble facades and golden mosaics. Most meals were communal. Romans ate reclining on couches in the triclinium, a dining room arranged around low tables. Guests leaned on their left elbows, using their right hands to pick at shared platters. Eating while lying down might seem decadent, but for many, it was a practical arrangement to showcase leisure and avoid appearing rushed or laborious. Dinner parties followed a ritual structure: gestatio, appetizers, prima mensa, main courses, and secunda mensa, desserts. Afterward came drinking games, music, and philosophical debates that lasted deep into the night. Street food was another vital part of urban Roman life. Thermopolia, the ancient equivalent of fast food counters, lined busy streets. Large terracotta jars called dolia were embedded in counters, keeping stews and spiced wine warm for passers-by. Fried fish, sausages, cheese-filled pastries, and honey cakes could be bought quickly, no reclining couch required. For many working Romans, these stalls offered their main hot meal of the day. Food preservation was a Roman specialty. They salted fish and meats, smoked hams, dried fruits, and stored olives in brine. Cheeses were aged in cool cellars, and nuts were carefully packed away for winter. Each amphora in the cellar represented not just sustenance, but security against famine and market shortages. Cooking equipment varied from simple hearths and clay ovens to elaborate bronze and iron stoves in wealthier kitchens. Cooks, often slaves, bore the brunt of smoke, burns, and endless cleaning. They ground spices with mortars, simmered sauces in copper pans, and maneuvered heavy roasting spits by hand. The work was exhausting, the hours long, but the final dishes were a testament to Roman inventiveness and appetite for novelty. As you drift in your bed tonight, imagine sharing a small bowl of pools with a friend, quietly scraping the last bit of porridge as the oil lamp flickers. Or perhaps picture yourself in a lavish triclinium, picking sweet dates stuffed with nuts, your mind wandering between poetry recitals and the sweet tang of diluted wine. Imagine smelling the sharp saltiness of garum drifting from the kitchen hearth, hearing the crackle of a spit-roasted bird, feeling the gritty crust of coarse bread scraping your gums. Feel the warmth of shared laughter, the drowsy satisfaction after too much wine, the sticky sweetness of honey lingering on your fingers. Imagine drifting off with a full stomach, the echoes of a lute, and the soft hush of a city settling into night beyond your villa walls. Breathe slowly. The bread is dense. The wine is watered. The fish sauce is strong. And tonight, there is no need to fight for a spot at the breadline. Sleep now. The hearth is quiet. Your stomach is full. And your dreams can wander through vineyard groves and honeyed feasts. Imagine stepping into a Roman bathhouse at dusk. The city beyond hums softly. Carts clatter, merchants shout, dogs bark in the alleys. But here, as you push aside the heavy curtain, a wave of warmth and a gentle fog greet you like an embrace. Steam coils around columns and drifts across tiled mosaics depicting sea gods and dolphins. Soft echoes of splashing water and gentle chatter fill the air, creating a hypnotic lullaby of warmth and motion. The Roman bathhouse, the thermae, was more than a place to get clean. It was the social heart of the city, an oasis where all classes could come together to relax, gossip, and escape the dust of the streets. Entrance fees were modest, and sometimes even covered by wealthy patrons on feast days, making the baths accessible to everyone from senators to freedmen to de laboris. Your visit began in the appetiterium, the changing room. Here, you stripped off your tunic and handed it to an attendant, who stored it in a niche carved into the walls. Valuables were at risk, thieves operated even here, so perhaps you carried only a wooden comb and a small vial of oil. From there, you might pass into the palestra, an open courtyard for exercise. Men wrestled, threw discus, or practiced mock sword drills, muscles gleaming with sweat and oil. Others lounged, exchanging rumors about politics, the latest gladiator victories, or which neighbor's dinner party had served the most garum-soaked dormice. Next, you moved through a sequence of heated rooms. The tepidarium offered gentle warmth, easing your muscles and coaxing sweat from your pores. Soft light glowed on the walls, flickering from oil lamps set in carved niches. You might recline on a stone bench, drifting into a half-sleep as attendants shuffled past, the faint splash of water echoing in the distance. Then came the caldarium, the hottest room. A large pool of steaming water awaited, heated by furnaces beneath the floor, the hypercaust system. Slaves stoked fires day and night to keep the water and air scorching. Here, bathers sweat heavily, pores wide open, their skin gleaming and flushed. An attendant might help scrape your skin with a strigil, a curved metal blade used to remove oil, sweat, and grime. The scraping sound was sharp, but the relief afterward felt divine, like shedding a second, dusty skin. Some might brave a quick dunk in a cold plunge pool, the frigidarium, before returning to the warmth. The sudden shock of cold water snapped the senses awake, leaving you gasping and exhilarated, your heart thudding like a war drum. A few repeated the cycle several times, believing it strengthened the body and cleared the mind. Beyond the physical cleansing, the baths were about connection. People struck business deals in steamy corners. Poets recited verses to appreciative audiences leaning against marble basins. Senators exchanged confidential whispers as they soaked side by side. Women, in separate baths or designated hours, shared secrets, arranged marriages, and admired each other's jewelry and hairstyles. The air buzzed with local news, who was marrying whom, who was expecting a child, which general had returned from Gaul with new scars and new lovers. Massage was another highlight. After the bath, some sought out attendants to knead weary muscles with scented oils. Olive oil infused with lavender or myrtle was a favorite, leaving the skin smooth and fragrant. Fingers pressed into knotted shoulders, slow strokes easing months of field work or military strain. While the oil soaked in, you might doze, dreaming of vineyards and quiet country villas. The bathhouse also offered amenities like libraries, gardens, snack vendors, and shaded courtyards. Food stalls sold honey cakes, dates, roasted chickpeas, and spiced nuts to hungry bathers. After sweating out the grime of the day, a small meal tasted sweeter, each bite a tiny celebration of comfort. Some even carried flasks of cheap wine, taking small sips between conversations. Music drifted through the air, played by hired performers on lyres or flutes. Echoes of gentle melodies mingled with laughter and the steady drip of water from stone fountains. Lamps flickered as dusk turned to dark, painting long shadows across columns and statues of Neptune or Venus. Not all bathhouses were equal. Lavish thermae built by emperors, like the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian, boasted grand halls, towering ceilings, and intricate mosaics. Their vast pools could hold hundreds at a time, their walls adorned with marble imported from across the empire. Poorer neighborhoods had smaller, simpler balneae, local bathhouses with modest pools and rougher tiles. But even the simplest bath offered warmth, cleansing, and precious social contact. Cleanliness was more about ritual than hygiene as we understand it today. Bathing daily did not mean truly clean skin. The water was rarely filtered, and oils rather than soap did most of the work. But the baths offered spiritual and social purification, a sense of renewal after dusty streets and crowded markets. As night fell, bathers trickled out slowly. Their skin shone under moonlight, their limbs felt heavy with delicious exhaustion. They stepped back into tunics, wrapped cloaks around damp shoulders, and slipped into sandals still warm from the sun. Some returned home to crowded insular apartments, others to suburban villas beyond the city walls. A few lingered, savoring the last warmth before facing the chill Roman air. Imagine lying on a warm marble bench, drowsy from the heat. The last notes of a flute dance through your mind as the strigil scrapes lightly across your back. The smell of myrtle oil mingles with drifting steam, your eyelids heavy, your heartbeat slow and steady. A final sigh, and your body feels as light as a summer breeze over the Tiber. Breathe deeply now. The water is warm. The oil is fragrant. The gossip fades to a gentle hum. Your skin is soft, your muscles loose, and your mind drifts between half-heard stories and half-remembered dreams. Sleep now. The lanterns dim, the marble cools, and the last echoes of laughter fade into the night. Imagine stepping into a Roman marketplace at sunrise. The air is crisp and carries the scent of fresh bread, fish, olive oil, and the ever-present hint of manure drifting from carts. Merchants shout above the growing crowd, each voice competing to sell olives glistening in brine, figs plump and sticky with morning dew, or bolts of linen dyed the colors of a summer sunset. The sun spills slowly over tiled rooftops, illuminating rows of stalls like an unfolding scroll. The market, or forum, was the heart of Roman daily life. It was not just a place to buy and sell but a beating social center, a swirl of gossip, deals, arguments, and unexpected reunions. Everyone came here, wealthy matrons with elaborate hairstyles wrapped in fine stolas, leather-effaced farmers from the countryside, barefoot children trailing behind with hopeful eyes. Vendors arranged their goods with practiced flair. Fresh vegetables were heaped into pyramids, purple cabbages, fat carrots, bunches of leeks still wet from the fields. Fishmongers shouted over crates of wriggling eels, octopus limbs hanging like strange ribbons. Cheese sellers carved hunks of sharp goat cheese, the scent sharp and earthy. The smell of honey cakes and fried chickpea balls drifted from a street cook's brazier, making mouths water and children tug at tunics. Above the din, a woman might haggle fiercely over a jar of imported dates. A farmer might trade a basket of eggs for a small hunk of salt pork. A passing legionary might slip a vendor a coin for a quick swallow of wine in a clay cup. Coins clinked constantly, bronze asses, silver denarii, each exchange weaving an invisible web of trust and suspicion through the crowd. The market was noisy, messy, alive. Donkeys brayed, goats bleated, and stray dogs wove expertly through legs, hoping for a fallen scrap. A juggler performed at the edge of the crowd, tossing clay cups high into the sky. Nearby, a fortune-teller traced shapes in spilled wine, promising news of future loves or upcoming fortunes for a modest fee. Arguments were common. A woman accused a garlic seller of watering down her oil. A man claimed his figs had been weighed unfairly, shaking his fists in the air. Watchmen intervened, threats flew, insults rained down in a symphony of creative Latin curses. Then, just as quickly, tempers cooled and business resumed. Children darted between stalls, chasing each other with figs as weapons, until they were shooed away by angry vendors. In another corner, scribes sat hunched with wax tablets, writing letters or recording debts for those who couldn't read or write. Nearby, an elderly philosopher might preach about virtue to a bored group of onlookers munching on almonds. Not all trade was local. Exotic goods arrived from across the vast Roman Empire. A silks from China, shimmering like water at dawn. A spices from India, pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, that filled the air with warmth and mystery. A fine glassware from Alexandria, so delicate it seemed like it could melt in your hand. A wine from Gaul, dark and sweet. Oysters from Britannia, still damp with salt water. These imports flaunted the reach of Roman power and wealth, though most ordinary citizens only admired them from afar. Some stalls sold small household items, rough clay lamps, coarse wool blankets, chipped bronze pins for tunics, wooden spoons carved by calloused hands. Many items bore evidence of constant reuse, cracks repaired, holes patched, surfaces worn smooth by countless meals and countless years. Nothing was wasted in a Roman home. Every object carried layers of stories and fingerprints of forgotten ancestors. Food, always, was the star. Vats of olive oil gleamed like molten gold. Wine vendors offered free samples, each sip a sharp reminder of sourness or surprising sweetness. Stacks of flatbreads, some plain, some studded with herbs, vanished quickly under greedy hands. Dates stuck together in sweet clumps, occasionally hiding an unlucky beetle or two. Garum, the famous fermented fish sauce, was ladled into clay jars, its pungent scent both beloved and reviled. People didn't just shop. They listened to local news, what senator had been exiled, which gladiator had won the last match, whose daughter had run away with a charioteer. Gossip flowed like the Tiber on a rainy day. Deals were struck in whispers over amphory, marriages arranged with a nod and a handshake, and debts forgiven or doubled depending on a morning's fortunes. Wealthier shoppers might be followed by slaves carrying baskets, heads bowed, eyes scanning for pickpockets. Some patrons wore rings on every finger, flaunting status as they examined ivory combs or delicate glass beads. Others came barefoot, calloused feet black with dust, praying for a discount on moldy lentils. The forum itself was ringed with temples and public buildings. Statues of gods stood watch, faces worn by centuries of whispered prayers and bird droppings. Nearby fountains gurgled steadily, their marble basins cradling coins tossed by hopeful wishmakers. Children splashed fingers in the cool water, earning scolds from passing matrons. As noon approached, shadows shortened, and the sun blazed fiercely against the stone pavements. Some people retreated to shaded porticos or ducked into nearby taverns for a cool cup of watered wine. Others lingered, haggling over the last olives or the final loaf of bread, driven by the fear that tomorrow's prices might be worse. A sudden trumpet blast might announce an approaching official, scattering the crowd like startled birds. Guards cleared paths, patricians adjusted togas, and market life paused for a heartbeat before resuming its pulsing dance. By late afternoon, stalls emptied. Rotten vegetables and fish heads littered the stones, picked over by stray cats. Vendors counted coins, packed up goods, and whispered final curses at the day's most annoying customers. Fires were extinguished, awnings lowered, and the echo of laughter faded under the pink glow of the setting sun. Imagine sitting on a rough wooden bench, the din of bartering fading to a soft hum. A warm breeze carries the scent of crushed herbs and sweet wine. Your hands are sticky with fig juice, your head dizzy from too many stories. You feel the ache in your legs, the pleasant tiredness of a day spent wandering through a living tapestry of sound and scent. As dusk falls, lamps are lit, casting flickering pools of light across the now quiet stones. A few late drinkers linger by the fountain, sharing wine and secret jokes. The market sleeps at last, waiting to awaken in a few short hours to the same symphony of life. Breathe deeply. The stalls are empty now. Your basket is full. The gossip is quiet. Tomorrow, the same melodies will play, the same bread will be broken, and the same deals will dance beneath the Roman sun. Sleep now. The market sleeps too. Your dreams are safe among the olives and figs. Let's slip off the dusty streets of Rome and wander quietly into the steamy haze of a Roman bathhouse. Forget squeaky-clean shower stalls and fluffy towels. This was a world of marble pools, sweating bodies, fragrant oils, and just a hint of questionable plumbing. Bathing wasn't just a private ritual. It was a social event. A place to see and be seen, to exchange gossip, finalize business deals, or simply show off your latest slave or sandal design. For Romans, cleanliness was a statement of civilization, a sign you weren't some barbarian trudging through the woods. At least, that was the idea. A typical bathhouse, thermae, was a sprawling complex, often resembling a palace more than a spa. You'd enter through the appetitorium, a dressing room where you'd strip down and leave your clothes with an attendant, called a capsarius. Don't expect privacy. You'd be surrounded by other bathers, all jostling for space, arguing about politics, and occasionally shouting at young boys trying to sneak a peek at valuables. From there, you moved through a sequence of rooms designed to slowly melt you into a puddle of contentment or exhaustion. At the frigidarium, a cold plunge pool that jolted your senses. At the tepidarium, a warm, mild chamber, perfect for easing into the experience. At the caldarium, a hot, steamy room where you'd sweat profusely and scrape off layers of dirt and oil with a curved metal tool called a strigil. At the laconicum, a dry, sweating room, like a modern sauna but less fragrant and more echoing with loud Roman curses. Romans didn't use soap as we do. Instead, they slathered themselves with perfumed oils, olive oil mixed with herbs, resins, or even crushed flowers. Once they were thoroughly slick, they used the strigil to scrape away dirt, sweat, and dead skin. Imagine dozens of people, all glistening in the flickering lamplight, scraping and chatting as if this were the most natural thing in the world. After scraping, they rinsed off in one of the pools and might receive a light massage with more oil. This was followed by a brisk rub-down with linen towels, if you were wealthy, or rough cloth scraps, if you were not so lucky. Some bathhouses even offered manicures, hair plucking, or foot scrubs, all done publicly with curious eyes watching nearby. The bathhouse was a democratic place, at least in theory. Rich and poor alike could enter for a small fee, though the wealthy often had better access, private rooms, or personal servants to help them through each stage. Children scampered between pools, old philosophers debated stoic virtues beside steaming tubs, and retired soldiers showed off scars to anyone within earshot. Outside the bathhouse, street vendors set up shop to catch customers coming and going. Fresh figs, skewers of grilled fish, honey pastries, and cheap wine were ready to lure bathers after their long steamy ritual. Some bathers even carried these treats inside, munching and sipping as they soaked, much to the horror of stricter moralists. Bathhouses, though grand, weren't always spotless. Drainage could clog, leaving mysterious floating bits in the pools. Oil and sweat formed scummy layers on the water. The floors were often slick with who knows what, turning every step into a risky dance. In crowded cities, water quality was a constant worry. Still, most Romans preferred communal filth over no bath at all. Personal hygiene at home was simpler and rougher. In small houses or rural areas, there were no baths, only water jars and basins. People washed their faces and hands daily, but full-body scrubs were rare. Lice combs were common household items, and many people shaved their heads or kept hair short to manage infestations. Scents and oils were crucial to mask body odor. Perfumed cones or lumps of scented wax were sometimes worn on the head, melting slowly through the day to drip fragrant oil down hair and neck. Tooth care was basic at best. Some Romans rubbed teeth with rough cloths dipped in crushed bones, oyster shells, or even charcoal. Mouthwashes included vinegar, salt water, or wine infused with herbs. Dental pain was common, and rotten teeth were simply yanked out by force. Public toilets, called phoriki, were communal too. Imagine rows of stone benches with keyhole-shaped openings, set over flowing water channels. People sat side by side, chatting or gossiping while relieving themselves. No privacy screens. No flush handles. Instead of toilet paper, they used a sponge on a stick, called a tussorium, dipped in water or vinegar and shared among users. When finished, they might wash hands in a public fountain outside or simply wipe them on a tunic, or each other, depending on temperament. Sewage systems in Rome were sophisticated for their time but still limited. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, carried waste to the Tiber River, where it mingled happily with everything else dumped upstream. During summer heat, the stench rising from both river and street drains must have been a constant companion, greeting nostrils before sunrise and long after sunset. Clean clothing was also a major struggle. Laundries, or phalanaki, specialized in washing and re-dyeing garments. But their methods were, let's say, unique. Clothes were soaked in vats filled with water, clay, alkaline ash, and urine collected from public urinals. Urine's ammonia content acted as a natural detergent, breaking down grease and grime. Workers stomped on garments barefoot, much like crushing grapes for wine. The smell was legendary, drifting down entire streets. Yet, this was the price for fresh tunics. After washing, clothes were rinsed, beaten, and brushed with fuller's earth to restore brightness. Finally, they were hung on rooftops to dry, fluttering like ghostly flags above the noisy Roman streets. Despite all these efforts, body odor remained a lifelong companion. Roman writers joked about neighbors' stench, lovers' smelly armpits, and the pungent reek of the forum crowd on hot afternoons. Perfumed oils were less about attracting mates and more about fending off gags. Even among the elite, hygiene was never perfect. Wealthy Romans might have private baths at home, complete with heated floors and servants to handle oil scraping and towel duty. But plumbing mishaps, clogged pipes, and poor water supply meant even the grandest villa sometimes stank. Bathing too often was even viewed suspiciously by some conservative moralists, who saw it as a sign of decadence and weakness. Through all this, Romans took fierce pride in their bathing culture. It marked them as civilized compared to barbarian tribes who preferred cold rivers or skipped bathing entirely. Bathing was woven deeply into identity, as essential as the toga or the senate. So now, as you lie cozy and clean in your bed, think of that hot caldarium steam rising around you, the scrape of the strigil echoing across marble walls. Imagine emerging into the pale Roman afternoon, skin gleaming, hair oiled, stomach rumbling for honey pastries. The air smells of olive oil, rose petals, and just a hint of latrine drifting in from the street. Your limbs are heavy, your mind is soft, and the world feels almost gentle. Breathe slowly. The bath is warm. The towel is rough but comforting. Your day has been scraped clean, for now. Sleep now. Your oil jar is empty, your sponge on a stick is tucked away, and the Roman sun is setting beyond the tiled roofs. Imagine waking before dawn in ancient Rome. The faint glow of oil lamps flickers along narrow alleys as your neighbors donkey brays impatiently. There is no gentle alarm tone. No snooze button. The city itself wakes you. Clanging carts, barking dogs, the sharp echo of iron striking iron in a nearby workshop. Whether you were a laborer, artisan, merchant, or farmer, your day began early. And it started with a simple truth. Survival was labor. The modern concept of a work-life balance would have seemed laughably decadent to most Romans. If you didn't work, you didn't eat, and your family didn't either. A farmer might trudge out before sunrise to check his small plot of land beyond the city walls. In spring, he turned the heavy, stubborn soil with a wooden plow pulled by oxen or even by family members if oxen were too expensive. Summer meant endless weeding, desperate irrigation, and praying to Jupiter for rain at the right moment. Autumn demanded exhausting harvests, cutting grain with sickles, gathering grapes or olives, and carrying heavy baskets back to storage pits. Winter required maintenance, mending tools, reinforcing fences, feeding livestock with carefully rationed fodder. The city laborer had a different rhythm but no less hardship. In the Subura district, bakers rose hours before dawn to fire up large communal ovens. Their days were filled with kneading, shaping, stoking flames, and shouting orders as neighbors lined up for their daily loaves. A baker's forearms grew thick and calloused, fingers burned from accidental touches to hot stones. Across town, a potter's workshop rang with the steady spin of wheels and the rhythmic thump of shaping wet clay. Clay dust filled lungs, stuck to sweaty foreheads, and crusted under fingernails. Broken pots piled up in corners, a constant reminder of fragile livelihoods. Metalworkers clanged away in cramped forges, sweat pouring into open furnaces. They hammered bronze, iron, and copper into tools, jewelry, or tiny statues. The air shimmered with heat, stung with acrid fumes, and rang with relentless hammering. Ears ached, eyes watered, and yet the work continued, day after day. For merchants and shopkeepers, the day began by opening wooden shutters, setting out baskets of fruit, bolts of wool, amphorae of olive oil, or small piles of cheap jewelry. Vendors shouted over each other, bargaining fiercely with mourning customers. Coins clinked. Children darted underfoot, begging or running errands. Pickpockets slithered between stalls, fingers quick as lizards. Those who carried goods, porters, bent low beneath crates, amphorae, and sacks of grain. They shuffled along stone streets polished slippery by countless footsteps. Some wore wooden yokes across shoulders to balance their burdens, vertebrae grinding with every step. Their pay? Barely enough to fill an evening bowl of lentils. Women's labor was constant and undervalued. In wealthier households, enslaved women rose before dawn to grind grain into flour, spin wool, weave cloth, tend gardens, and prepare meals. In poorer homes, wives and daughters did it all themselves, their arms as strong as any soldier's. Children were expected to help as soon as they could walk, carrying water, feeding animals, sorting vegetables, or sweeping dust from doorways that filled up again within minutes. Public works also needed constant hands. Construction crews hauled stones for new temples, aqueducts, and villas. They built roads, repaired city walls, and dug new drains for the ever-growing sewage system. No modern safety gear cushioned their bodies. Falls, crushed fingers, infections, all common. Workers might receive small tokens of wine or bread as bonuses. Otherwise, the reward was simply surviving another day. Slavery, of course, underpinned much of this labor force. Enslaved people did everything: housework, field labor, mining, tutoring children, even performing in public spectacles. A life of forced work, endless submission, and a constant threat of brutal punishment. For them, each day was less a choice than a sentence. Lunchtime, or rather, a midday pause, offered scant comfort. A hasty meal of bread, olives, maybe cheese if luck was kind. A quick gulp of watered-down wine. There were no leisurely cafe chats or picnic blankets in sunny parks. Instead, laborers squatted in alleyways, perched on stones, or leaned against walls to eat, always alert to the next shout from a foreman or customer. After the break, it was back to work. Shadows stretched long and thin across courtyards, signaling the slow crawl toward evening. Fingers cramped, backs hunched, sweat-soaked tunics clung to skin. Many worked until dusk. No artificial lighting guided them beyond that. When the sun dipped behind tiled rooftops, tools clattered to the floor and muscles sagged in relief. Returning home, workers navigated crowded streets, dodging stray dogs, street performers, and pushy vendors hawking last-minute deals. Some dropped into taverns, known as popini, for cheap wine and a quick meal of beans or sausages. These places were rowdy, smoky, and filled with gossip. Arguments could erupt over dice games or heated debates about local politics. A drunken brawl might spill into the street, followed by quick interventions from city guards. Still, for many, a popina was a rare chance to relax and laugh after a grinding day. At home, the evening routine resumed. Children clung to parents, asking for scraps or stories. Small oil lamps flickered in corners. A final meal, often a thin porridge or reheated leftovers, filled bellies just enough to quiet growls. Garments were mended, sandals patched, tomorrow's meals prepped in silence. If they could afford it, a family might burn incense to chase away bad smells and evil spirits before sleep. A clay amulet might be tucked under the pillow to guard against nightmares. Whispered prayers rose to household gods, the Lares and Penates, pleading for safety, health, and perhaps just one uneventful day tomorrow. Sleep came quickly to exhausted bodies. But rest wasn't always peaceful. Lice itched at scalps. Creaking rooftops threatened leaks. The din of the city carried on. Dogs barking, lovers quarreling, a drunk staggering into a doorway by mistake. Dreams, if they arrived at all, were fleeting shadows of real life, hauling grain, mending tunics, dodging an angry overseer. Yet even in this grinding cycle, tiny triumphs glimmered. A sold basket of figs meant an extra crumb of cheese. A finished pot meant enough coins for a candle. A neighbor's praise for strong plowing or skilled weaving felt like a festival. For the Roman worker, life wasn't about comfort but about enduring. Finding moments of pride in calloused hands, in sturdy sandals, in a day survived. As you lie in your bed tonight, consider those dawn hours in Rome. Before coffee, before email pings, before ergonomic chairs. Picture a world of rough tunics, heavy baskets, and a city that never truly slept. A world humming with the pulse of hammers, hooves, and heartbeats. Breathe deeply. You won't carry amphory tomorrow. You won't mend cloaks by oil lamp or pray for clean water. But for a moment, let yourself drift alongside them. Feel their fatigue, share their simple victories. Sleep now. The forge fires are dying. The market stalls are empty. And your dreams can wander beyond the crowded alleys of Rome. Open your eyes to a busy Roman morning, if only in your mind. The market district, the Macellum, is already alive before the first rays of sun streak the tiled rooftops. Vendors shout their wares from wooden stalls, voices echoing off stone walls and weaving into a thick tapestry of noise. The scent of fresh herbs collides with the sharp tang of fish left too long in the heat. Children dart between legs, chasing stray dogs or begging for crusts. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays impatiently, yanking at its rope and scattering a flock of chickens. Imagine strolling slowly down this packed avenue. To your left, a fruit seller waves figs at passers-by, promising they're the sweetest of the season. Next to him, a woman sells bundles of leeks and garlic, her hands permanently stained with earth. A baker stands by steaming loaves stacked high, slapping flies away with a frayed cloth. A fishmonger calls out the merits of his catch, though his voice fights against the stinging smell of salt and scales. A young girl haggles over dates, her eyes sharp and unwavering despite her small stature. There are no fixed prices, no quiet queues. It's all loud debate, sly hand gestures, and the constant dance of coins changing hands. Around a corner, you pass a stall of terracotta lamps, simple and elegant, some adorned with small images of gods or animals. Further on, a tanner's stand radiates the nose-wrinkling odor of cured hides. Strips of leather dangle like strange, floppy curtains. Next door, a potter stacks jars and bowls, each slightly lopsided, each with fingerprints frozen into the clay. He offers a cracked bowl at half price, joking that it holds water as well as a politician holds his promises. Above this chaos, public criers move from street to street, reading official announcements from wooden tablets. Their voices cut through the din, news of new taxes, decrees from the Senate, upcoming games in the arena, or the latest scandals involving a senator's runaway parrot. People pause briefly, murmur, shrug, and return to haggling. News spreads by ear, twisted and reshaped by every retelling. Among the crowds, pickpockets slip quietly from mark to mark, eyes flicking for an open purse or a dangling bracelet. A merchant shouts angrily as he realizes his coin pouch is lighter than before. A group gathers quickly, drawn to any hint of drama, and the thief melts into the alleyways. In another corner, an itinerant barber sets up shop. A stool, a basin, and a rusty blade, that's all. Clients sit stoically as he scrapes their stubbly cheeks, slaps them with a damp cloth, and offers to trim hair for a few extra coins. Nearby, a tooth puller brandishes his tongs with theatrical flair, promising instant relief. The line for him is short. No one looks eager to test that particular claim. Vendors of street food draw their own noisy clusters. Imagine biting into a slice of garam-drenched bread, the sharp fish sauce exploding on your tongue, equal parts pungent and addictive. Nearby, a seller stirs a large pot of pulse, a thick porridge of spelt grain, beans, herbs, and sometimes chopped vegetables. A young boy sells honey cakes, their sticky sweetness leaving trails down chins and fingers. Another hawks roasted chickpeas, warm and salty, perfect for snacking as you jostle through the throng. Each bite carries the story of fields, harvests, and the hands that prepared it. Water sellers shout from street corners, offering sips from large amphorae for a few small coins. The water may be lukewarm, tinged with the taste of clay or old fish barrels, but on a hot afternoon, it's better than nothing. A few wealthier citizens carry small flasks of posca, a sour wine diluted with water and herbs, a refreshing, if acidic, alternative to the dubious water supply. Amid all this, entertainers pop up like mushrooms after rain. A street musician plucks at a kithara, singing a bawdy song that draws laughter and a few scandalized gasps. A pair of acrobats balance on each other's shoulders, somersaulting above startled shoppers. A fortune teller squats beside a pile of cracked olive pits, muttering predictions about love, luck, and ill-fated journeys. A mangy dog wanders by, pausing to sniff each stall, hoping for a dropped crust. Not all the noise comes from humans. Goats bleat indignantly, pigs squeal, and caged birds squawk sales pitches of their own. A runaway goose flaps down the avenue, pursued by a red-faced vendor shouting curses that would make Mars blush. Dust swirls up with each stamp of a hoof or shuffle of a sandal, turning the whole scene into a moving painting of chaos and commerce. Above it all loom balconies draped with faded linens and tunics drying in the sun. Women lean out, gossiping in sharp, rhythmic bursts. A grandmother drops a basket down on a rope to buy onions from below, pulling it back up hand over hand. Children watch wide-eyed, hoping to spot a friend or a passing parade of entertainers. In wealthier districts, markets feel more orderly but no less crowded. Marble columns shade fancy stalls, perfumed oils mingle with imported spices, and silks from the east shimmer under the sun. Customers here are more refined, or at least pretend to be, testing wool, sniffing perfume, squinting at tiny scrolls with lists of prices. Slaves scurry behind, carrying baskets already brimming with honeycombs, grapes, jars of fish sauce, and loaves wrapped in fig leaves. Even in these polished corners, the same core truth pulses. Markets are the heart of daily life. They are where you hear the city's latest gossip, argue over fish prices, plan festival outfits, and exchange knowing glances with neighbors. It's noisy, unpredictable, sometimes infuriating, and utterly necessary. When the sun climbs high, the energy softens. Vendors lean back, wiping brows with dusty sleeves. A few nap against their baskets, half listening for thieves. Shoppers drift toward shaded porticos or popany, where cold drinks and small meals beckon. A short afternoon hush settles before the market roars back to life in the evening. As you breathe slowly now, imagine standing at the edge of that endless Roman crowd. The crush of voices, the sting of smoke and salt, the warm weight of a honey cake in your hand, a donkey flicking its tail near your leg, a woman haggling over eggs so fiercely you think she might start a war over yolks, a little boy tugging at your tunic, offering half a fig with a gap-toothed grin. It is a world alive in every sense, rough, noisy, and impossibly human. Now lie back. The market can wait until tomorrow. The shouts fade. The fishmonger's bell tolls softly in the distance. Somewhere, a final cart rattles over cobblestones, and the last donkey finds its stable. You are far from the dust, the noise, and the endless jostle. Sleep now. The lanterns are dimming. The honey cakes are gone. And your dreams can wander down quiet Roman lanes, free from the morning bargains. When the Roman workday ended, if it ever truly ended, the city didn't slip quietly into the night. Instead, it turned to entertainment, craving distraction from the endless grind of grain, clay pots, and smoky hearths. After all, even in a world without streaming services or weekend brunches, humans needed a break from reality. The phrase bread and circuses wasn't just a metaphor. It was a strategy, a promise, and sometimes a trap. Imagine the towering silhouette of the Colosseum against a lavender Roman sunset. A colossal structure, humming with the anticipation of tens of thousands of spectators. Crowds spill into the arches, sandals scraping marble, voices echoing under the grand vaults. Vendors hawk honeyed nuts, figs, and cheap wine in clay cups. Some carry baskets piled with fried chickpea cakes or savory pastries stuffed with onions and herbs. Excitement fizzes in the air like a barely contained storm. You find a seat, or more likely, a cramped patch of stone bench, shoulder to shoulder with a fishmonger on one side and a toga-sporting lawyer on the other. The games begin. Gladiators stride into the arena, shimmering under the morning sun. Some are towering Gauls, their hair tied back, swords gleaming. Others are slender, quick-footed Thracians, darting about with curved blades and small shields. The crowd roars at every blow, every tumble, every fleeting glimpse of victory or sudden spray of sand. For the upper classes, it was a social theater as much as a blood sport. Patricians judged the quality of the fighters like they might critique a new vintage of wine. Senators leaned in to trade rumors. Wives fanned themselves dramatically. Children shouted bets. Meanwhile, down in the cheap seats, farmers and shopkeepers howled themselves hoarse, throwing scraps of olive pits at the sand when a favorite fighter lost. Beyond gladiators, wild beast hunts, called venations, offered even more spectacle. Exotic animals from across the empire. Lions from Africa, tigers from the east, even crocodiles and elephants. Beasts driven into the arena, driven mad with hunger or terror. Hunters in ornate armor fought them, using nets, spears, and carefully rehearsed tactics. To the audience, it was thrilling, a glimpse of far-off lands and savage nature tamed under Roman might. To the animals, it was a nightmare. Naval battles, Normachi, were the pinnacle of Roman excess. Imagine an entire arena flooded with water, real ships maneuvering inside, oars cutting waves under the gaze of an emperor. Prisoners or condemned men acted as sailors, forced into deadly mock battles that left the floor a slick mix of salt water and blood. At night, lanterns glimmered on the water, music drifted above the clash of swords, and the city forgot its hunger and disease for a few hours. Outside the arena, more intimate entertainments played out in every neighborhood. Actors in tattered tunics performed comedic plays on makeshift wooden stages. Stories about bumbling husbands, nosy wives, and conniving slaves, the kind of tales that survived in every tavern and backyard. Masks exaggerated expressions, allowing even the farthest audience member to see a sneer or a wide-eyed look of shock. The jokes? Sometimes clever, often crude, but always deeply human. In wealthier districts, private dinner parties offered a different stage. Reclining on couches, guests dined on stuffed dormice, garum-soaked fish, honey cakes, and endless wine. Musicians played softly, dancers swirled in shimmering veils, and poets recited verses that half the crowd ignored while gossiping. A guest might challenge a neighbor to a drinking contest, slurred Latin echoing between marble pillars. Sometimes, surprise entertainment arrived, a performing monkey, a contortionist, or an illusionist pulling birds from under his robe. The night might stretch into dawn, the air heavy with perfume, laughter, and regret. Public baths were another social theater. Far from just places to scrub away sweat, they were hubs of news, business, and flirtation. You could soak in a hot caldarium, plunge into a cold frigidarium, or sweat in a steamy laconicum. Massages, depilatory services, even libraries lined the larger bath complexes. While reclining in warm pools, citizens struck deals, arranged marriages, spread rumors, and compared each other's new haircuts or muscle tone. A day at the baths could end with a quick meal at a popina, a Roman tavern, perhaps some fried fish and cheap wine before staggering home. Festivals added another layer of excitement to Roman life. There were more than 150 festival days on the Roman calendar, excuses to skip work, dress up, and indulge. During Saturnalia, masters served slaves, Dice games flourished in alleys, and gifts exchanged hands in a carnival-like inversion of social norms. Torches flickered along streets, musicians filled the squares, and pranksters roamed, laughing as they threw flour at unsuspecting strangers. During Lupercalia, young men in goatskin loincloths ran through the city, striking bystanders with strips of hide for fertility and luck. A bizarre, noisy ritual that left young women giggling and old matrons shaking their heads. Chariot races at the Circus Maximus brought together even larger crowds than the Colosseum. 4 factions, reds, blues, greens, whites, inspired fierce loyalty, almost religious in intensity. Spectators wore faction colors, screamed chants, and bet fortunes on their favorite charioteer. Accidents were common, horses crashing into sharp turns, drivers thrown violently under wheels. Victory meant wild celebration. Loss could end in riots spilling into the city streets. After a particularly dramatic race, fans might spend days reenacting the final lap in tavern corners, voices hoarse and hands waving excitedly. At home, simpler amusements filled quiet evenings. Board games like Ludus Latrunculorum, a strategy game akin to chess, kept minds sharp. Knucklebones, an early dice game, offered quick thrills, though often ended in arguments over cheating. Children chased each other around courtyards, shrieking and laughing, while elders squatted nearby, telling stories of legendary heroes and tragic love affairs. Neighbors gathered to share stale bread, a jug of sour wine, and long, meandering conversations under the stars. All these entertainments, from bloody spectacles to backyard jokes, formed the Roman idea of leisure. A world that demanded harsh labor and endless obedience needed relief, even if it came wrapped in violence or coarse laughter. In these moments, the sharp lines between rich and poor blurred slightly, if only for an hour. The fishmonger and the senator might cheer for the same chariot. The beggar might catch the same joke as the merchant's wife. Entertainment was the great equalizer, and sometimes, the great distraction. Now, as you rest in your quiet room, no lions roar beyond the door, no chariots thunder past your window. Your theater is a flickering screen, your feast a midnight snack perhaps waiting in the fridge. Yet, close your eyes and you might still hear the echo of Roman laughter, the distant roar of a crowd, the clink of amphorae against stone. Feel the warmth of a torchlit festival, the hush before the first swing of a gladiator's sword, the soft strum of a street musician's lyre drifting into the dusk. Sleep now. The crowd has dispersed. The arena sands are quiet. And your dreams can roam freely through Roman festivals, far from the sharp blades and roaring mobs. In the Roman world, religion wasn't a separate event held in solemn silence once a week. It was the air you breathed, the water you fetched, the thread woven through every task and thought. Every dawn began under the watchful gaze of countless gods, and every night ended with whispered prayers against unseen spirits. Picture yourself waking in a cramped Roman insular apartment. Before your first sip of watered wine or bite of bread, you shuffle to the small household shrine, the lararium. Here, tiny figurines of household gods, or lares, stand guard beside the image of your ancestors. You light a small oil lamp, murmur a few lines, gratitude for surviving the night, pleas for health, for an unspoiled grain sack, for the neighbor's chicken to stop wandering into your kitchen. In public spaces, shrines popped up on corners, nestled beside markets and crossroads. Votive offerings, small clay figurines, carved limbs, inscribed tablets, littered the altars. Someone might leave a wax ear to thank a god for healing an infection, or a bronze foot to beg relief from endless miles of walking. Public fountains had statues of nymphs or minor deities, encouraging people to toss in coins or flowers to secure goodwill for the day. The Roman pantheon was as busy and layered as the city itself. There was Jupiter, king of the gods, thundering above. Juno, watchful over women and marriages. Mars, fierce and beloved, patron of soldiers and fields alike. Minerva guided wisdom and crafts, Venus charmed love and gardens, and Neptune watched over fishmongers and sailors. Beyond these, hundreds of local and imported deities coexisted. Egyptian Isis, Persian Mithras, even obscure forest spirits known only to one neighborhood. Religion also governed the rhythm of the year. Festivals punctuated the Roman calendar like bright beads on a dusty string. The Saturnalia in December appended normal roles. Masters served slaves, gifts exchanged, and dice games erupted in even the sternest homes. It was a time of wild laughter, risky confessions, and public mischief. During Lupercalia, young men clad in goat skins sprinted through the city, striking bystanders with strips of hide to promote fertility, half festival, half frenzied chase. Other festivals like Floralia celebrated the bloom of spring with flower garlands and theatrical performances filled with bawdy jokes and playful nudity. Divination was a constant undercurrent. Before signing a contract, boarding a ship, or planting crops, Romans consulted auspices, signs interpreted by augurs. A flight of birds, a sudden thunderclap, the shape of an animal's liver after sacrifice, all carried divine messages. A business deal might halt if a raven croaked ominously nearby. A senator might cancel a speech if lightning struck the Capitoline Hill that morning. Superstition clung to every detail of life. You avoided certain days for important tasks, like marrying or starting a journey. You knocked on wood, yes, that custom stretches back to ancient Rome, to ward off misfortune. A spilled offering was an ill omen. A dog howling in the courtyard foretold death. Even dreams bore warnings. A fish swimming away? Trouble at work. A cracked jug? A friend's betrayal. Many kept dream books hidden under mattresses, consulted as nervously as a modern horoscope. Household spirits were both protective and unpredictable. The Lares and Penates guarded home and pantry. Genius Loci watched over gardens and crossroads. But lurking beyond were malevolent ghosts, lemures and larvae, spirits of the angry dead, forever restless. People wore amulets of phallic charms or Medusa heads to repel evil eyes. Babies had tiny bells and bracelets to distract vengeful spirits. Doors bore protective symbols, scratched hastily during a thunderstorm or after a neighbor's sudden illness. The funeral process itself was deeply ritualized, designed to appease the deceased and calm the living. Professional mourners might wail dramatically at the head of the procession, tearing at their hair and clothes to show grief. Coins were placed in the mouth of the dead, obelus for Charon, the ferryman of the underworld. Relatives carried images of ancestors, reciting lines to secure the soul's passage. After burial or cremation, the family would purify the house with fire and water, then share a funeral feast to welcome normal life back. Temples rose across every Roman city, from massive marble complexes to tiny rural shrines. They were bustling centers, not silent halls. Vendors sold figurines and incense sticks. Priests performed sacrifices, their tunics splattered with blood. Musicians played flutes or lyres to mask the final bleat of a goat. Petitioners queued to ask for blessings, a safe childbirth, victory in a chariot race, or simply relief from endless back pain. Religion was not purely solemn. It was woven into entertainment, politics, even gossip. Emperors claimed divine favor, depicted themselves on coins alongside Jupiter or Mars. Rumors of omens, a statue crying blood, a two-headed calf born outside town, could topple a politician's reputation or ignite public panic. A suspicious sneeze in the Senate might cause senators to scatter, robes flapping, hands raised to ward off curses. Even leisure carried divine overtones. A sip of wine might be dedicated to Bacchus before a feast. A small offering dropped before a race, hoping Fortuna would tilt the outcome in your favor. A statue of Venus hidden in a lover's garden, invoked before a moonlit tryst. As dusk fell, the city transformed. Torches flickered along alleys, casting long, restless shadows. Prayers drifted from open windows, a mix of Latin chants and whispered folk charms. Some residents scattered salt at doorways, others tied bundles of herbs above thresholds. In tenements, families huddled, passing down stories of gods and monsters, eyes wide as they traced protective symbols in the smoky air. The connection between Romans and their gods was both intimate and transactional. The phrase "do ut des," I give so that you may give, captured the spirit of Roman piety. There were no guarantees of divine love, no promise of paradise. Instead, there was a constant negotiation, a wary dance between mortal hopes and celestial whims. Now, as you settle deeper under your blanket, Imagine kneeling before a tiny household altar, oil lamp flickering, the faint scent of frankincense curling in the air. Imagine carrying an amulet on a leather cord, fingers brushing it during a thunderstorm. Imagine waking in the dark, listening for the rustle of restless ghosts, offering a quick prayer before drifting back to uneasy sleep. Close your eyes. The augurs are silent. The gods watch from marble pedestals, patient and distant. The city sleeps, curled beneath its 1,000 protective charms. Sleep now. Your dreams are guarded. The gods have heard your whispered wishes, and no spirit will trouble you tonight. If you think ancient Romans spent all their time building roads, marching in sandals, or praying at smoky altars, think again. They worked hard, yes, but they played just as fiercely. Entertainment wasn't a weekend luxury. It was an essential part of Roman identity. A way to escape the crowded streets, to forget the endless taxes and sudden fires, and to feel, if only for an hour, the rush of being alive. Let's begin at the baths. Imagine slipping off your dusty tunic after a long morning at the market. You step into the bustling thermae, greeted by a humid cloud of chatter and the pungent mix of olive oil and sweat. Men and women, usually at different times or in separate areas, gathered here daily, not just to scrub themselves clean but to socialize, gossip, and conduct business. For a small fee, often affordable even to the poor, you could wander between heated rooms, the frigidarium, cold plunge, tepidarium, warm room, and caldarium, hot, steamy chamber that left your skin pink and your mind dizzy. Massages with perfumed oils followed, performed by nimble-fingered slaves wielding strigils, curved metal scrapers to remove oil and dirt. Friends discussed politics, arranged marriages, debated chariot teams, and muttered rumors about the latest imperial scandal. Merchants cut deals, philosophers lectured, and the occasional pickpocket worked the crowded dressing rooms. It was the Roman equivalent of a social media feed, a bustling hub of life and noise where status and stories flowed as freely as the water. Now step out of the baths and walk toward the grand amphitheater. You hear it before you see it. The roar of thousands, the clashing of metal, the trumpet fanfare echoing beneath the hot sky. The Colosseum in Rome held up to 50,000 spectators, eager for a bloody afternoon. Gladiator games were the ultimate public spectacle. From humble origins as funeral rites honoring the dead, they evolved into elaborate state-funded events designed to distract and control the masses, bread and circuses, as the poet Juvenal lamented. The games began with animal hunts, wild beasts from across the empire released into the arena, hunted by skilled fighters called bestiarii. Lions, leopards, elephants, even crocodiles dragged in from the Nile, all met violent, theatrical ends. Next came the executions, condemned criminals facing death in creative and horrifying ways, staged as grim moral lessons or mythological reenactments. Then, at last, the gladiators. Armed with swords, tridents, nets, and small shields, these men, and occasionally women, fought in pairs or teams, blood spattering the sand, the crowd howling for a killing blow. Some gladiators became celebrities, adored by the public, with graffiti praising them on tavern walls. Women threw flowers and love notes into the arena, and wealthy patrons might sponsor a fighter, much like sports teams today. Victory meant fame and wealth, defeat meant disgrace or death. But in a world where survival was uncertain, even a fleeting moment of triumph was worth the gamble. For those who preferred less violent diversions, the theater offered comedies, tragedies, and pantomimes. Roman comedies often involved mistaken identities, bawdy jokes, and slapstick misadventures. Think of it as the sitcoms of the ancient world. Audiences laughed, shouted, and even threw nuts or fruit if the performance displeased them. Theater wasn't a polite, silent affair. It was loud, chaotic, and deeply woven into urban life. Chariot racing was another passion, especially at the Circus Maximus. Picture the stadium, a giant U-shaped track, seating over 150,000 fans, the smell of horse sweat and cheap wine swirling through the stands. 4 teams, reds, blues, whites, greens, competed in thunderous, breakneck laps around a central barrier called the spina, decorated with statues and obelisks. Drivers, called aurigi, were superstars, some winning fortunes and fanatical devotion. Rivalries ran so deep that riots occasionally erupted, leaving streets littered with broken benches and spilled amphorae. In quieter corners, Romans indulged in simpler games. Children and adults played dice, tali, knucklebones, astragali, and board games like ludus latrunculorum, a sort of ancient chess involving strategy and deception. Winners bragged, losers sulked, and both might accuse the gods or fate when fortune turned against them. Gambling was rampant, despite being officially frowned upon. A lucky streak could change a life. A bad run might mean pawning a cloak or a beloved cooking pot. Feasting was entertainment in itself. Banquets for the wealthy sprawled into the night, featuring multi-course meals, live music, poetry recitals, and drunken debates. Dishes like stuffed dormice, honey-glazed ham, and spicy fish sauces appeared alongside platters of fruit and nuts. Reclining on couches, guests nibbled while servants hurried around with jugs of wine, refilling cups faster than the host could blink. Conversations drifted from politics to gossip to philosophical riddles, punctuated by bursts of laughter or scandalized gasps at a particularly bold dancer's performance. Drinking games, sometimes involving guessing the volume of a cup or reciting verses without error, kept guests teetering between mirth and oblivion. By dawn, many stumbled home barefoot, tunic-stained, heads swimming with cheap Falernian wine and half-remembered jokes. Festivals turned entire cities into temporary theaters. On Saturnalia, masters served slaves, dice rolled on every surface, and garlands crowned even the most stoic heads. During Floralia, performers danced nearly naked in the streets, flowers rained from balconies, and the city throbbed with unrestrained delight. These festivals blurred lines between classes, encouraging a few days of shared laughter and risky confessions before daily hierarchy reasserted itself. In the countryside, entertainment was simpler but no less vital. Seasonal fairs, storytelling gatherings around communal fires, and village competitions, from foot races to wrestling, filled evenings with sore muscles and hearty laughter. Local bards recited myths and legends, sometimes embellishing them to earn extra ale or a second helping of stew. Children played tag among olive trees, daring each other to climb higher or leap farther. Grandmothers sat nearby, spinning wool and shaking heads at each scraped knee. Superstitions laced even play. Children whispered about local spirits haunting certain trees, or about the ghost of a neighbor seen at dusk near the well. Winning a game might earn you a protective amulet. Losing too often might lead to a whispered curse. These beliefs made every pastime shimmer with an edge of magic and fear. Now, as you nestle deeper under your blanket, imagine the echo of hoofbeats, the clash of swords, the crack of dice on a stone table. Picture the bright ribbons of chariot drivers snapping in the wind, the flickering lamplight on marble statues, the roar of 1,000 voices crying out for victory or vengeance. Then, picture a quieter evening. A small circle of friends throwing dice by a smoky hearth, the smell of stewing lentils curling into the night, a dog snoring nearby. Breathe in the laughter, the cheers, the whispered bets and shared secrets. Feel the scratch of a woolen cloak, the warmth of a clay cup in your hands, the thrill of a moment when all of Rome felt like a game. Sometimes brutal, sometimes gentle, always alive. Sleep now. The chariots have stopped. The dice are still. The city's restless songs have softened into a gentle lullaby. As you drift deeper into the Roman world, imagine the clatter of sandals on marble steps, the low hum of voices echoing through stone corridors, and the sharp bark of a lictor's command cutting through the air. Justice, in ancient Rome, was not a blindfolded lady holding balanced scales. It was a noisy, public, sometimes brutal theater of power and persuasion, more about keeping order than defending individual rights. Roman law was complex and layered. In theory, it applied to everyone, from the humble vegetable seller in the Subura to senators draped in purple-bordered togas. In practice, however, money, connections, and social rank could tilt the scales faster than you could say Cicero. Let's begin at the Forum, the beating civic heart of the city. Picture the bustling square, merchants hawking fish and olives, philosophers arguing loudly, beggars extending thin hands, and amid it all, officials striding through with scrolls tucked under their arms. Legal notices were posted on large white boards called album, written clearly so that even the semi-literate might know the day's new decrees. Court sessions often took place in open-air basilicas. There were no quiet, wood-paneled rooms with solemn judges and hushed juries. Instead, imagine a crowd pressing close, gossip swirling like flies on a summer fig. Spectators cheered, jeered, and offered advice, whether asked for or not. Advocates, the precursors to modern lawyers, performed their arguments almost like theater pieces. A good advocate wasn't just persuasive. He needed to be charismatic, dramatic, and sometimes tearful, throwing himself to his knees or raising his arms to the heavens in emotional pleas. The famous orator Cicero could sway entire crowds with a single well-timed pause or a dramatic accusation. Lawyers, you see, were celebrities in their own right. Witnesses were called, sometimes bribed, sometimes intimidated, often unreliable. Testimony could be shaky, but a powerful patron backing your case might matter more than any evidence. A simple theft could be overlooked if the thief paid the right person. A minor insult could escalate into exile if you offended someone influential enough. Punishments were equally creative and, to modern eyes, shockingly harsh. For small crimes, fines or beatings were common. A thief might be lashed, branded on the forehead, or forced to work in the mines, a near-certain death sentence. More serious crimes carried more terrifying penalties. Parricide, the murder of a parent, resulted in the poena calet. The criminal was sewn into a leather sack with a dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a snake, and thrown into the Tiber. An unforgettable end for an unforgivable crime. Slaves faced even harsher realities. If a master was murdered, all the household slaves could be executed on suspicion of complicity, regardless of actual guilt. For them, Roman justice offered no appeals, no sympathetic ears, only swift, pitiless judgment. Prisons weren't meant for long-term stays. The Tullianum, or Mamertine prison, was a grim, underground holding chamber used to detain people awaiting trial or execution. Dark, damp, and airless, it was more a place of purgatory than punishment. People didn't serve sentences, they awaited fate, and most did not come out alive. Corruption simmered everywhere. Bribes oiled the machinery of Roman governance. A coin slipped to a guard might grant better food or a quiet message to loved ones. A favor promised to a senator could transform a certain conviction into a miraculous acquittal. Even the noblest families were known to grease the right palms to escape scandal. Roman law wasn't all blood and terror, though. It also laid foundations for many modern legal systems. The 12 Tables, first inscribed in 450 BCE, set out fundamental rights and obligations. They covered issues from property disputes to family inheritance to funeral expenses. While harsh, they represented an early attempt at codifying rules that applied to all free citizens. Over time, emperors added layers of legal codes. Augustus refined inheritance laws. Hadrian organized a more systematic approach to jurists' opinions, and Justinian, centuries later, compiled and streamlined the sprawling mess into the famous Corpus Juris Civilis. Echoes of these laws still resound in modern civil law traditions. There were also civil cases, land disputes, debts, and broken contracts. Rather than violent punishments, these involved restitution, paying damages or surrendering property. However, if you failed to pay, creditors might seize you and, in extreme cases, enslave you to work off the debt. Bankruptcy wasn't a clean slate. It was a slide into bondage. Family law had its own labyrinthine twists. Patriarchs held almost godlike power over their households. A father could disown a son, force a daughter to marry, or reclaim a dowry. Women, while technically under the legal authority of male relatives, sometimes maneuvered skillfully, especially wealthy widows or priestesses. Through patronage networks and quiet deals, they could wield surprising influence behind the scenes. Superstitions also seeped into legal thinking. Trials might invoke the gods, oaths were sworn over altars, and divine omens weighed heavily on verdicts. If a thunderclap sounded at a crucial moment, some judges saw it as a divine message to halt proceedings. A sneeze might be interpreted as a favorable sign or an ill omen, depending on which way the wind blew. Execution was public, a grim performance meant to terrify onlookers and cement authority. Crowds gathered to watch crucifixions, beheadings, or criminals thrown to wild beasts in the arena. People brought children along, vendors sold snacks, and musicians sometimes played to accompany the dying screams. The line between punishment and entertainment blurred disturbingly. At the same time, the law acted as a civic glue, holding together a sprawling empire of diverse languages and customs. Roman citizenship, with its legal privileges, was a prize pursued eagerly across provinces. Local elites in Gaul, Hispania, or Syria might adopt Roman dress and customs just to earn the legal protections that came with the coveted title Civis Romanus. As night falls in your mind, imagine standing in a crowded basilica. The air smells of sweat, oil lamps, and ink. A scribe records each statement on wax tablets, his stylus clicking softly. A mother pleads for her son's life. A senator argues land boundaries with a farmer, his purple stripe glinting under torchlight. Outside, a prisoner waits in chains, eyes hollow, hoping for a bribe to save him or a patron to speak on his behalf. Imagine the tension, the noise, the unpredictable currents of favor and fortune swirling around each verdict. Imagine lying on your straw mattress that night, turning over each detail, replaying each word, wondering if tomorrow's dawn will bring freedom or the Tiber's cold embrace. Now, as you snuggle into your soft blanket, far from Roman crowds and brutal judgments, breathe slowly. No lictor stands at your door. No senator demands tribute. No snake waits in a leather sack. Just quiet, safe warmth, and the faint echo of a world where justice was loud, dangerous, and deeply human. Sleep now. The crowds have dispersed. The scribes have put away their tablets. And your dreams are free to wander beyond the laws of emperors. Close your eyes and imagine waking up in a Roman home. The first thing you see is not your smartphone screen or an alarm clock, but a small shrine in the corner, the lararium. A flickering oil lamp casts shadows on painted household gods, the lares and penates, guardians of the hearth and pantry. Before even thinking about breakfast, you might place a small offering here, a pinch of flour, a bit of wine, or a few fresh flowers. You whisper a quiet prayer, hoping for protection from illness, good harvests, or simply an uneventful day without sudden fires or angry tax collectors. Roman religion wasn't just something for temples and priests. It pulsed through every moment of daily life. It governed business deals, crop planting, family gatherings, and even whether you dared to step outside on certain mornings. Imagine stepping outside into the bright Roman sunlight. The streets echo with the calls of merchants, the clatter of carts, and somewhere, a priest is chanting a dawn hymn to Jupiter. You pause briefly if a crow crosses your path or if a dog howls nearby, both considered ominous signs. Perhaps you hurry back inside, or maybe you offer a quick sacrifice to avert bad luck. Roman religion was a mosaic of old Italic traditions, Etruscan mysteries, and Greek influences. It was less about belief in the modern sense and more about correct practice, orthopraxy rather than orthodoxy. Doing the right rituals, at the right time, in the right way, was far more important than inner conviction. Public festivals filled the Roman calendar like beads on a necklace. There was scarcely a month without a celebration, feast, or ritual parade. The Saturnalia in December transformed social order. Slaves dined like masters, gambling was permitted, and people exchanged small gifts, laughed loudly, and wore silly hats. For a few days, the rigid hierarchy wobbled like a drunk at a tavern. In February, the Lupercalia sent half-naked young men running through the streets, whipping bystanders with strips of goat hide to encourage fertility. Women lined up willingly, giggling and shrieking as they were gently struck, a bizarre blend of festival fun and serious magical belief. On other days, you might witness the Vestalia, honoring Vesta, goddess of the hearth. During this time, the inner sanctum of her temple opened to women who came barefoot and disheveled, bringing humble offerings in hopes of household blessings. The calends, nones, and ides divided each month. These dates marked market days, debt deadlines, and ritual points for various sacrifices. The Ides of March gained grim fame thanks to Julius Caesar's assassination, but for most Romans, it was just a reminder to settle accounts or attend a local festival. Imagine the great temples rising above the Forum. the massive temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, and the elegant temple of Vesta with its eternal flame tended by the Vestal Virgins, and the temple of Castor and Pollux, gleaming white in the sun. These temples were not quiet places of personal reflection. They were bustling hubs, scenes of sacrifices, banquets, legal meetings, and even banking transactions. Priests and priestesses moved among the crowd, reading entrails of sacrificed animals to interpret divine will. A liver's blemish might cancel a public assembly. A bird's flight could decide military strategy. Animal sacrifice was central. Sheep, pigs, and bulls were led in solemn processions, decorated with garlands, sometimes accompanied by flute music to soothe them before the fatal blow. Blood was seen as a bridge to the divine, a vivid, immediate way to communicate with gods beyond. Omens, or auspices, guided decisions large and small. Before a wedding, a family might consult a haruspix, a priest skilled in reading animal entrails, to ensure a favorable future. Before a general left for war, augurs observed birds, interpreted thunder, and analyzed sacred chickens' eating habits. If the chickens refused to eat, plans might be delayed. The gods were not to be hurried. In the home, small daily rituals formed a backbone of spiritual life. The morning offering at the lararium was followed by household chores done with a sense of divine presence. A farmer sowing seeds whispered invocations to Ceres. A sailor pouring wine overboard before a voyage asked Neptune for calm seas. Even a simple toast at dinner might be accompanied by a murmured "Bean Taibai," to your good fortune. Roman children were introduced to these customs from birth. On the 9th day, 4 boys, or 8th day, 4 girls, a naming ceremony called dies lustricus took place. A small bulla, a protective amulet, was placed around the child's neck, meant to ward off evil spirits and envy. Children would wear this amulet until coming of age. Marriage ceremonies also blended legal, social, and religious layers. A bride might dedicate childhood toys to household gods before stepping into her new life. She would arrive at her husband's home carried over the threshold to avoid unlucky stumbles. Fire and water were presented at the door as symbols of purity and shared life. Death rituals were equally elaborate. The dying Roman tried to catch their final breath into the mouth of a loved one, a symbolic transfer of spirit. Coins were placed in the mouth or hand to pay Charon, the ferryman of the underworld. Funeral processions filled streets with wailing mourners, flute players, and actors wearing ancestor masks, imagines. Tombs lined roads outside the city walls, so the dead would not pollute the living space but would still be visited often. Inscriptions on these tombs often blend pride, humor, and resignation. Stranger, stop and read. Here I lie, who never harmed anyone, and ask that you not harm me. Or, enjoy life while you can. The afterlife is long and silent. The gods were everywhere. Juno watched over women, Mars guided soldiers, Mercury helped merchants and thieves, Bacchus enlivened wine-soaked revelries, and Janus, the two-faced god, guarded thresholds and transitions. Every activity, from baking bread to forging swords, had divine watchers. Foreign cults also crept in. The mysterious rites of Isis from Egypt attracted crowds. The frenzied, ecstatic worship of Cybele and her self-castrating priests shocked conservative senators. Mithras, beloved by soldiers, offered secretive cave ceremonies and blood-soaked initiations. For many, these imported cults promised personal salvation and mystical experiences missing from traditional rites. As twilight settled, a Roman might thank Vesta as they covered the hearth, offer wine to the Lares for a quiet night, and listen to the distant echoes of a temple ceremony drifting through the streets. Now, as you lie under your soft blankets, imagine these layers of prayer and practice. Imagine kneeling before a smoky altar, oil lamps flickering, incense curling toward the stars. Imagine each choice, each meal, each journey weighed and measured under countless divine gazes. No moment too small to escape cosmic notice. No day too mundane to be filled with omens and offerings. Breathe deeply. The gods are at ease tonight. Your hearth is warm. Your door is guarded. And in your dreams, you might walk the marble steps of a temple, hear the chanting of priests, and smell the heavy sweetness of burning myrrh. Sleep now. Your amulet glows softly. The eternal flame is safe. And the gods whisper only gentle blessings tonight. In our final sleepy descent into Roman life, let's drift slowly into the hours when work paused and leisure took over. Because even in a world of strict discipline, endless toil, and religious rituals, the Romans craved excitement, gossip, and the occasional rowdy afternoon at the arena. Imagine it's a warm afternoon in Rome. The city hums like a restless beehive, carts rattling over uneven stones, street vendors shouting about olives and garum sauce, children darting between legs chasing stray dogs. And amid all this noise, there's a sudden hush, then a distant roar. A chariot race has begun. The Circus Maximus, a colossal U-shaped stadium, could hold up to 250,000 spectators, nearly a quarter of Rome's population at its peak. 4 teams thundered around the track: the Reds, the Whites, the Blues, and the Greens. Fans waved colored cloths, screamed themselves hoarse, and bet wildly on their favorite drivers, known as origi. These races were dangerous. Chariots overturned, drivers were dragged beneath horses, and wrecks became legendary stories retold in smoky taverns for weeks. But the adrenaline, the collective roar of the crowd, and the chance to see fortune made or lost in an instant made it irresistible. When not at the track, Romans often visited the amphitheater, most famously, the Colosseum. There, under the baking sun, tens of thousands watched gladiators fight to the death or battle wild animals imported from across the empire. Lions from Africa, bears from Gaul, crocodiles from Egypt. Executions were scheduled entertainment, criminals condemned ad bestias, to the beasts, or forced to reenact mythological deaths in gruesome detail. While to us it may seem brutal beyond imagination, for many Romans, these spectacles were cathartic, a public drama where courage, fate, and divine judgment played out visibly. Families attended together, munching on figs and roasted nuts, whispering bets on which fighter would survive the afternoon. For the less bloodthirsty, the theatre offered tragedies and comedies by playwrights like Plautus and Terence. Actors wore exaggerated masks to project emotions to distant seats. Audiences laughed, hissed, or even threw fruit if displeased. Tickets were free, sponsored by wealthy patrons seeking public favor. A good performance might be followed by a boisterous dinner in a nearby tavern, where gossip about the actors or senators flowed like cheap wine. But perhaps the most universally loved leisure activity was visiting the bathhouse, the thermae. Imagine stepping through grand arched doorways into a world of steam, echoing voices, and glistening tiled floors. A typical bath complex included the apoditerium, changing room where you left your clothes, and perhaps worried someone might steal them. The frigidarium, cold plunge pool. The tepidarium, warm room for gentle acclimation. The caldarium, hot, steamy chamber that opened your pores and left you flushed. Slaves or attendants massaged scented oils into skin, scraped away sweat and grime with curved metal tools called strigils, and poured pitchers of water to rinse off. Business deals were negotiated here, poems recited, and neighborhood scandals dissected. People discussed politics, recounted dreams, and made dinner invitations, all while steaming like dumplings. The bathhouses were social equalizers. Senators might bathe beside common tradesmen. Though luxurious private baths existed, public baths were everywhere, accessible even to poorer citizens for a small fee or free during festivals. For more intimate gatherings, Romans loved dinner parties, convivia. Picture reclining on cushioned couches, propped on one elbow, scooping up honey-soaked dates, slices of spiced sausage, or oysters fresh from distant coasts. Entertainment might include flute girls, poetry recitations, philosophical debates, or risque jokes from professional jesters. Drinking games called conversatio tested endurance and wit. Guests might crown themselves with flower garlands and call for ever stronger wine, chanting Libamus. Let's drink. The wealthiest hosts aimed to impress with exotic dishes. Peacock tongues, dormice stuffed with nuts and honey, or fish served in garum sauce so pungent it could make a marble statue weep. Even simpler amusements thrived. Romans adored dice games, alea, knucklebones, astragali, and board games like ludus latrunculorum, a strategic military-style game similar to chess. Children played with dolls made of rags and wax, rolled hoops through narrow streets, or played tug-of-war in dusty courtyards. Street performers, jugglers, acrobats, fire-eaters, entertained spontaneous crowds for a few coppers. Festivals added a special sparkle to life. The Floralia in spring exploded in a burst of flowers, theatrical performances, and playful licentiousness. The Ludi Romani, held in honor of Jupiter, featured games, processions, and stage performances over many days. During these times, streets overflowed with music, color, and sweet treats sold from wooden carts. Some retreated from city chaos to countryside villas. There, leisure meant reading scrolls in vine-covered gardens, tending to fish ponds, composing letters, or lazily reciting Virgil under fig trees. Philosophical friends might stroll along shaded paths, arguing about stoicism or Epicurean pleasure, all while servants prepared simple rustic meals nearby. And yet, even in these moments of calm, death's shadow was never far. Romans loved the phrase memento mori, remember you must die. In mosaics and wall paintings, skeletons sometimes danced with wine jugs, or carried scrolls with reminders that pleasure was fleeting. This wasn't meant to inspire gloom but rather to encourage savoring each fleeting indulgence. Imagine drifting to sleep after a day at the baths, muscles relaxed, skin slick with oil and perfume. Your mind replays the day's gossip. The baker's daughter eloping with a legionnaire, a senator's new scandal, a charioteer's spectacular crash. Outside, the city settles into a low hum. Lanterns flicker along the narrow alleys. Cats prowl silently among discarded fig skins. As your breath deepens, you dream of dice clacking on a marble tabletop, the sudden hush before a gladiator's final blow, or the shimmering heat rising off the Circus Maximus track. You dream of sharing pomegranates with friends beneath painted porticos, the bittersweet taste lingering long after you wake. Now, as your eyelids droop, imagine the warm embrace of a bathhouse, the scent of rose oil on your neck, the soft laughter echoing in the steam. Imagine reclining on a couch, wine cup in hand, a friend reciting lines of Ovid beside you. The sun sets beyond tiled rooftops, the world grows hushed, and the gentle rhythm of Roman leisure lulls you towards sleep. Breathe deeply. The races are over, the dice are silent, the bathhouse empty but warm in memory. Tonight, your mind drifts across marble courtyards and moonlit gardens, unburdened by chores or worries. Sleep now. Your cup is empty, your skin is smooth, and the gods watch kindly from the shadows. Tomorrow can wait, but tonight, you are at peace beneath the Roman stars.